Reactions and implications. The legal war at the ICC could come into question after a landmark U.S. court verdict found the Palestinian Authority and PLO liable for terror attacks. Islamic State militants kidnapped dozens of Christian men, women, and children in northeast Syria, an area that saw heavy fighting between IS and the Kurdish militia backed by the U.S.-led coalition. And Eurozone finance ministers approve a 4-month bailout extension for Greece, setting in motion a string of reforms to bring the country back from the brink. Good evening. As we reported last night, a landmark ruling in U.S. federal court found the Palestinian Authority and the PLO liable for terror attacks committed during the Second Intifada. Those killed or wounded several Americans. The court awarded the plaintiffs $218 million in damages, but the U.S. Anti-Terrorism Act could see that sum tripled. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hailed the verdict today, saying it clearly showed the Palestinian leadership was responsible for the bloodshed. The Palestinian Authority, for its part, is set to appeal the verdict. But the implications go beyond this. It could also have deep implications for the Palestinian bid to have the ICC investigate Israel for war crimes. We'll look at this and other developments in the West Bank with our correspondents in Bethlehem, Shai Ben Ari, Maxime Perez, and Faleh Habib. But first, here's a look back.
Now the PA, the Palestinian Authority, knows that there is a price for sending suicide bombers to our malls, to our cafes, and blowing our buses up.
We do believe that we have a good case. We do believe that we will win the appeal.
Society is terrorized by terror. Need to show different kinds of courage. They need the courage of governments who will fight terrorism and not knuckle under it.
It's about accountability. It's about justice.
بالفعل موضوع ترتيب للرسالة السياسية واضحة ولقطاعات تكون مبرمجة خلال الفترة القادمة بمناطق مختلفة.
And joining me on set tonight is senior Middle East analyst Avi Isakharov and Dr. Ghassan Abdallah, director of the Center for Applied Research in Education that deals with nonviolent communication. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with me. So, Dr. Abdallah, I want to begin with you. Simple question. How big of a blow is this verdict to the Palestinian Authority?
Actually, this is not a blow for us because we know that some parties in the Israeli government have been working very hard to get this. And if you look at the timing of the decision, it is no more...
1 month before Israeli elections. 1
month before Israeli elections. It is by those who are supporting Netanyahu and the right wing in Israeli government.
But it is a U.S. court. It's a United States court in New York.
Excuse me, just to continue. Secondly, I think we have to congratulate some American law firms because they are the only winners from this. And such a step or such a decision, I think, is we consider it as a qualitative support to the Palestinian move to join the ICC. Because a time will come where Israel finds itself that it has no enough money to pay for the Palestinians. This is one thing. Second thing, we are totally sure that we were not responsible for the security at that time because during that time, the Israeli army was in the whole West Bank.
I want to get in a moment to the security cooperation, to the link between Fatah and Hamas both then and now.
There was no security coordination between the PA and the Israeli government at that time because there were incursions to all Palestinian territories, to all.
So before we go back in time, Avi, as Dr. Abdallah, you seem to be suggesting that the U.S. court is sort of linked in one way or another to the Israeli government. Is this in fact connected, or is it a court decision that happens to make Netanyahu look good at a time when he needs to?
Look, the court decision comes after years and years and years, and I know because I was asked and being advised of how to approach it or not to approach it. this is not related to the Israeli government. And I know that the Palestinian thought right now is what we call al-mu'amara, meaning that the Israeli government is part of this appeal and the lawyers are working for the Israeli government. This is not the case. It's a private lawyer company that is working on behalf of some Americans that were...
Of 11 families.
Yes, 11 families. And at the end of the day, I know that suddenly everyone in the Palestinian side is saying, look, we're 1 month before the elections. This has got to have some kind of a connection to the elections. This is not the case this time.
This is one of the only things happening here that maybe not be connected to the elections. Before we continue, let's get a little more of the background. Correspondent Shachar Peled has a closer look at the verdict against the PLO and PA and the potential implications.
A historic American verdict was handed down Monday against the Palestinian Authority, finding it liable for attacks in Israel more than a decade ago.
Now the PA, the Palestinian Authority, knows that there is a price for sending suicide bombers to our malls, to our cafes, and blowing our buses up. And we will pursue and will make sure that the PA will pay every dollar of this judgment.
A New York civil jury ordered the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority to pay $655 million for involvement in 6 terrorist attacks from the time of the Second Intifada, which broke out in September 2000. The sum is a triple the penalty of the actual $218 million verdict under the anti-terrorism laws governing the case. 10 American families who were victims of the shootings and bombings between 2001 and 2004 that killed 33 people and injured over 450 sought to use U.S. courts to seek damages and were victorious in their long-awaited lawsuit.
It's about accountability, it's about justice. As I said to the jury, there's nothing that can bring the loved ones back. Money has to stand in for other things because that's the only power this jury had. But the jury sent a very clear message that those who commit terror against Americans will be held accountable.
The Palestinian Authority indicated it would appeal, as its lawyers claimed that late PLO chairman Yasser Arafat and his agents condemned the attacks and blamed them on rogue low-level employees. Meanwhile, Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, called the verdict a moral victory for Israel and for victims of terrorism and said it confirms the PA's responsibility for terror attacks. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is still working to convince the International Criminal Court to indict Israel for war crimes in last summer's Gaza war. Indeed, this judgment is now of great personal risk. It directly connects the institution he heads, the Palestinian Authority, to violent crimes he accuses Israel of. Although dating back to the Second Intifada, it also shines a legal beacon on the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So, Ave, I want to pick up where Shachar left off in the report, the ICC. This is sort of the next step after the verdict that everyone is talking about. Will it affect the Palestinian sort of bid to take Israel to court at the ICC?
I'm not that sure about that. I think that already what we see is the PA withdrawing, or not really withdrawing, but temporarily holding down its decision to go to the ICC. I think that there are new thoughts, new thinking in the PA right now as we speak about this option of going to the ICC. They understand that there's a price regardless of the decision that was taken in the US yesterday by the court. I think that they understand that there are some very strong implications and effects on themselves, meaning there will be a price that almost each and every one of the Palestinian leadership will need to pay because of going to the ICC.
Is that the case? Is Abbas reevaluating going to the ICC?
I don't think that the PA will withdraw from joining the ICC. On the contrary, they have already taken the decision and they are still with it and for it, and they will go for it. And you will see on the 1st of March what will happen.
What will happen on the 1st of March?
There will be the general meeting for the Revolutionary Central Committee, and they will take this decision in support of Abbas' decision to join the ICC. This is one thing. Second thing that I'd like to mention, we see in this step taken by some of the American justice, that this American justice that we do not suspect at all, we do respect, and we are sure that one day they will dare to face the reality that the PA was not responsible at all for the security, even of the Palestinians in the West Bank.
But if we are talking about implicated
If
in
I
this
finish
of
this
Hamas
point,
and the
please.
Al-Aqsa brigades, I want to add this and then I will let you continue. We're talking about militants from Hamas and the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, which was directly connected to Yasser Arafat at the time. So how can
even
really
Yasser Arafat
it be
at that
separated?
time, even Yasser Arafat at that time, who was at all having no authority, neither in the West Bank, nor in Gaza, nor in the in Israeli areas, not at all.
Officially or unofficially?
Officially and practically.
Officially he had authority.
Officially and practically, he was not having at all any role at all, because his offices were surrounded by the Israeli military tanks, you see. And somebody who's surrounded by the military tanks cannot at all control what's going to happen in Tel Aviv or in Haifa or in West Jerusalem. This is one point. I can see that this is another practice of pressure against the PA to not going to the ICC. And instead of
the
practicing...
U.S. court decision is a political move to stop
it is.
Abbas from going to the ICC?
I think it is a pressure, part of the pressure against Mahmoud Abbas.
But you began saying that you do trust the U.S. justice system, but this is saying that it's really just a political mechanism.
This court in Manhattan does not represent, in my opinion, the whole American justice system. Does not at all. Let me ask them through you, if you allow me. What about those thousands of Palestinians, children and women, who were killed in Gaza? What about those?
This is important. This is key, but this is
not
those part of that trial?
who were killed by the Israeli army during the incursions, the West Bank, at that time?
Well, for this, Abbas can go to the ICC. It could be theoretically another verdict. But again, you're mixing something else with this verdict before. Avi, I definitely want to hear what you have to say in response. But let's go first to New York, where attorney Nitzana Darshan-Leitner is standing by. She's of the Israeli Law Center and one of the attorneys representing the families there in this lawsuit. Attorney Darshan-Leitner, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we've had a very sort of lively discussion about the reactions to this verdict. First of all, the reactions from you and from the families you represented.
Okay. Well, we are grateful to the American court and the American jury for finding the Palestinian Authority and the PLO responsible for these horrific terror attacks where the plaintiffs got their loved ones killed or injured. After 11 years of litigation and tremendous effort put into this case, the New York jury found these entities responsible and inflict them with damages to be paid to the victims.
Do the families sort of see this, or you as a lawyer being involved in this case for so many years, see this as a precedent for future such convictions on terror attacks?
Well, this is the first case the Palestinian Authority defended themselves. Usually they just get default judgment for lack of participating in the case. This time they decided to go before a jury and to present their defense. Obviously, they were not successful, maybe because of the reason that their defense did not make sense. We are able to prove that the employees of the Palestinian Authority, those who are on salary in the Palestinian Authority, policemen, security guards, intelligence officers, all being paid by the Palestinian Authority, were actually those who committed the attack or maybe perpetrated the attack or planned the attacks, and therefore the Palestinian Authority is responsible as their employer. The arguments of the Palestinian Authority that these were only non-important employees who did what they did in the afternoon hours, meaning rogue employees, they had no control over them, they didn't know about their activity, were found false because of the situation where the Palestinian Authority today, from the day of the arrest of these terrorists, have been paying them salary. The terrorists.
So the
that
court
that
did
arrested
find a direct connection between the Palestinian Authority and those that carried out attacks. That is, they were aware there was enough of a connection to prove culpability.
Not only that, no, it went deep into the liability in terms of connection between the Palestinian Authority personnel to the terror attacks. We brought convictions of and confessions of these terrorists, admitting that they are employees of the Palestinian Authority, admitting they are. We showed files of these terrorists run by the Palestine GIS, General Security Services, of treating them as regular employees until today. You know, they're sitting in the Israeli jail being convicted for life sentences for killing Israelis, and yet the Palestinian Authority is paying them salaries, supporting their families on a monthly basis, paying compensations to the families of the suicide bombers from the Martyrs Foundation, and promoting these employees in rank while sitting in jail. This convinced the jury that these are not rogue employees, that the people who perpetrated the attack and took part on killing the victims are basically people who did these attacks under the authorization of the Palestinian Authority according to its policy, its directed and known policy.
Attorney Nitzana Darshan-Leitner, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us this evening.
Thank you.
Avi, I want to return for a moment actually to what Dr. Abdallah, you mentioned before that, in fact, which sounds quite different, contradictory to what the attorney was just telling us, that Yasser Arafat didn't really know what was going on, that he was limited by Israel and doesn't really need to take responsibility.
I agree and I disagree. What do I mean about that? Yasser Arafat has a system, and I describe it as a kind of chaotic or under control chaos. Meaning it was very, yes, completely Middle East. Meaning it was very convenient for him to say, I didn't know, I didn't hear, I didn't see anything. It wasn't me, it wasn't up to the Palestinian Authority. While at the same time he was paying the salaries of some people that belong to Al-Aqsa Brigades. Now the PA today is a problem. The appeal is 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And over there, yes, that was a big problem. Why? Because Yasser Arafat, and there are proofs for that. You know, Yasser Arafat had a red pencil, and with the red pencil, a red pen, he used to sign the orders that was saying pay this and pay that. And these are names of people that were involved in terrorist attacks, starting with Marwan al-Barghouti and continuing with all the members of Al-Aqsa Brigades that some Palestinians will say they are not terrorists. But the problem is that the U.S. court sees them as terrorists. Now, more than that, it's not that you have the fingerprints because of the signing of Yasser Arafat. After they were in the Israeli jail, like Hamas members, like Hamas leaders, like Abbas al-Sayed, like others, the PA paid them a monthly salary or whatever you want to describe it.
Okay.
And so at the end, one might say, then again, I'm a Palestinian. This is something that we need to support our prisoners. But for an American court, this is a proof that the PA supported them.
And I'd like the Americans and you yourself to know the other proof. Arafat was paying those, and the Israeli government is allowing the most terrorist Israeli person who was bombing Palestinian schools in East Jerusalem to run the elections for the coming Knesset.
He wasn't. He wasn't. Baruch Marzel maybe he's a racist, maybe you can say many things about him, but he was not involved in terrorist attacks. So what will the Israeli
jury and the American jury system will label him? As member of the Knesset?
Then again,
it needs to go to a jury for it to have a verdict, to have a United States court.
That's
any
why
court,
we are
there
going
needs to be
to the
case.
ICC. That's why we are going to the ICC. Not to punish the innocent people, not to do anything against those who did not do anything against the Palestinians, but we are going to the ICC to stop the ongoing apartheid against the Palestinians, to stop the confiscation of the lands, to stop the assassination of the Palestinians. You know, now we have 300 children who are less than 14 years old in Israeli jails.
Will Abbas's technocrat government, or whatever you'd like to call it, a connection with Hamas, challenge that at the ICC?
Excuse me to correct your saying. It's not a coalition with Hamas. It is a non-political technocrat government.
There
is no one from Hamas. There is no one from Fatah in this government at all. I can assure you 100%.
Dr. Hassan, I agree totally with you about the reconciliation government. The problem is that it's not going to solve the Palestinian Authority's problem right now with the court's decision. Meaning, if we go 11 years ago,
the PLO
2004...
The PLO is the one who is going to solve this, and I can assure you that we will win the case because we are having the right, total right, to prove that we were not involved in this. And the Israeli army at that time, and Sharon himself was in charge of these massacres because he was the prime minister and he was the one who was governing the West Bank.
I don't agree with that, sorry. It's too easy to blame the Israelis for bombing in Park Hotel and killing innocent people. If you don't want to agree because you don't want to face the reality. No, I'm not.
At that time,
I face the reality and I follow the reality.
The incursions from 2002 till 2005, the Israeli army till now is controlling every centimeter in the West Bank.
But the suicide
yesterday
attacks,
they were in Heshi camp
and
Kalandia camp, and they killed
Hamas's
two innocents.
Al-Aqsa attacks started before the
No,
operation.
this decision was for events took place in between 2002
during the second
and 2000,
but these were not the first
2002
cases.
and 2004. Okay? And the 2002 and 2004, the whole West Bank and Gaza was under till now under the Israeli security control.
The suicide attacks took place way before April 2002, and I know the dates, and I remember the dates, and I remember the day after the.
Can you tell me the dates?
Yes,
please. Tell me the dates.
March 30th, 30th. Sorry, the attack in Park Hotel in Netanya. Then the Israeli army. 2002. Then the Israeli army invaded.
March 27th, 2002.
No.
Then the Israeli army invaded into the West Bank. Before that, there were no big invasions.
The Israeli army,
not even around the Muqatta.
The Israeli army invaded the West Bank after the ugly visit made by Sharon to Al-Aqsa and the big demonstrations against this.
This is not true. This is not completely not true.
It was April 2002. There is, amidst all of the chaos in the Middle East, there is at least some order to facts, which, as journalists, we must put in order.
Formal and civilian buildings at that time.
Dr. Abdallah, let's pause for a moment. I want to go to something else that's happening between the Israelis and Palestinians, but it is important to get dates and facts correct here for us. Let's step out of here for a moment to Bethlehem, where military correspondent for the News Today, Shai Ben-Ari, is standing by today. A lot of events there as well. 19-year-old Palestinian man killed. Tell us a bit more about what happened there today.
Yes, Nurit, the events basically happened overnight in the early morning hours here. Here in Bethlehem, right over the hilltop here to my left is the Dahaisha refugee camp, where an IDF force entered that camp in the early morning hours, as I said, to conduct an arrest operation of a wanted suspect. While they were there, a group of Palestinian youths basically tried to foil the operation and began clashing with the soldiers, throwing Molotov cocktails, bricks, and stones. The soldiers, in response, opened live fire, with one Palestinian at least being shot, a 19-year-old by the name of Jihad Shkhadeh al-Jafari. His family says he was actually on a rooftop at the time that he was shot, and found only an hour and a half later, where he was then rushed to hospital and then died later of his wounds. The autopsy results have just recently been released following his death, following the examination of his corpse, and they revealed that he was shot in the upper torso from close range. Whether or not that contradicts the version of the family is unclear. In any case, his funeral was held later in the day with thousands attending, and also shops here in Bethlehem were closed in mourning.
Shai Ben-Ari in Bethlehem tonight. Thanks very much for this. So, you know what? Let's step out. Also, Bethlehem, we have this U.S. terror trial, which we've spoken about a lot, and I don't feel that we've finished, but there are other events. Also, in Nablus, in the West Bank, the electricity company, Israeli electricity company, which has, the Palestinian Authority has a massive, something like $500 million debt, decides to temporarily shut off electricity to these cities. Is this a smart move? Is this leading to catastrophe, even if they're owed the money? Is it political?
I think there's a series of stupid moves that are being made by the Israeli government, although now the government is saying it's not us, it's
This is a trend here. It's not us,
yes,
we're not responsible.
It's not us, it's Meni Naftali, it's not us, it's Yair Lapid, it's not us, it's the electrician company, it's not us, it's not us. And even about Rawabi, for example, it's not us, it's Silvan Shalom, although he's a minister.
A new Palestinian city, Rawabi,
the new
that has
Palestinian city
water
that is
problem.
waiting for the water, that is waiting to be connected to water supply. So I think that we're doing a stupid step after a stupid step after a stupid step. I wrote an article saying last night together with Amir Tibon from Walla website asking, is someone in Israel is interested in a third uprising? Maybe they are,
because it is an Israeli
holding
government
the taxes money for the Palestinian Authority. It's stupid from the Israeli perspective, from the Israeli interest. Even the security interest is saying we need the PA, we need the security forces, and they are doing that. Rawabi, it's the best Israeli interest, keep them in a nice
stabilize, to build up the city,
of course,
to have
the
it
same with the electricity.
So we saw exactly this sort of thing before Operation Protective Edge, the summer war between Israel and Hamas, the same issue of revenues, of money not getting to Hamas, of Israel withholding money, and we see that this has very big effects.
Two different points.
How big of an effect will this decision by the Israeli Electric Company have in the West Bank?
I said it in this studio, I think 3 months ago, that the Israeli politicians are similar to a motorcycle race. Each one is doing her best to win the elections. And Netanyahu, Bennett, and Lieberman are one of those people. Lieberman, 3 days ago, he said that he is going to assassinate the Palestinian prisoners. Imagine. Jewish people speak like this. Imagine.
We know the election politicking going on, but I'm interested to hear from you, from the Palestinian side, what is going on in the West Bank, and is this decision likely to really bring a third intifada?
More frustration and more aggression, not only against the Israeli occupation, but also against thinking of any peace process with the Israelis. Because it's not easy to feel that I, as a father, unable to offer the basic needs for my children. And it's not the matter of salaries. He was focusing on salaries. It's not the matter of salaries. It is the collapsing of hospitals, schools, and all the infrastructure.
Do you think Abbas is taking enough responsibility for those for that infrastructure?
Of course. He's doing more than his best for that.
On this note, which I'm sure Avi has a response to, and it's always more complicated, there's always more to say, but for now we have to wrap. Avi Sachav, Dr. Hassan Abdallah, thanks very much for being with me. Next time we'll continue the conversation. And that's it for us for now. Just 2 minutes. We'll be back for the rest of the news today. Don't go anywhere. Reactions and implications, the legal war at the ICC could come into question after a landmark U.S. court verdict found the Palestinian Authority and PLO liable for terror attacks. Islamic State militants kidnapped dozens of Christian men, women, and children in northeast Syria, an area that saw heavy fighting between IS and the Kurdish militia backed by the U.S.-led coalition. And Eurozone finance ministers approve a 4-month bailout extension for Greece, setting in motion a string of reforms to bring the country back from the brink. Welcome back to the news today, and we move now to Syria. Only 1 week after the beheading of 21 Coptic Christians in Libya, the Islamic State terror group is believed to have kidnapped at least 90 people from Christian villages in northeastern Syria in dawn raids on the villages. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has the latest.
Minorities in Syria are once again in jeopardy. According to the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 90 Christians were kidnapped by the Islamic State in the northeastern region Tuesday. The abduction took place after the extremist Islamic group took over 2 Assyrian villages in the province of Hasakeh from the Kurdish forces. With these disturbing developments, It seems the IS is becoming even more of a major threat to minorities in the Middle East and perhaps beyond. A new UN report released on Monday reveals the horrific cost of the conflict in Iraq. The report says the direct targeting of civilians and indiscriminate attacks by IS and associated armed groups against civilians may amount to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possibly genocide. Meanwhile, on the Iraqi front, the fighting is shifting to the city of al-Baghdadi at the Anbar province, as Iraqi forces move forward to push the IS out the town. The city is seen as a major strategic point due to its proximity to the El Assad airbase, where US Marines are training Iraqi troops. New US Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter, who visited the Gulf countries last week, has said that the defeat of the IS can and will be accomplished.
Achieving the lasting defeat of ISIL will require a combined diplomatic and military effort.
But as history shows, it may be too early to come out with hasty predictions. Mission may be accomplished, but without beating around the bush, it's not yet clear when and how.
And with me from Stockholm, Sweden, is Dr. Kamal Alibwani, a member of the Syrian opposition. Dr. Alibwani, good evening.
Good evening.
So let's step away from a moment from the atrocities committed by the Islamic State across the Middle East, which we speak about on a regular basis, and focus on the Christian community in this case. What is the status of Christians and other such minorities in the Middle East amidst the onset of the Islamic State?
It is so sad. I think the minorities and the majority suffer from terrorism and from dictatorship and from civil war. All of these groups get fanatic. Nobody apart from this conflict. As the regime insists in organizing local militia and fight everywhere, so everybody involved and everybody pay high price. But the Christian minority is suffer a lot now from ISIS in north of Syria, so we are so sad about that.
Let's move for a moment to the opposition, which you're of course a part of. We saw not long ago a meeting of the Syrian opposition with the Assad regime in Moscow, unsuccessful, unsurprisingly. What does the map of the Syrian opposition look like today?
We need third option, not terrorism, not criminal regime. So we need a process, a new process to rebuild the authorities on the free land, to rebuild our state and our society and our unity, because Syria have several religions and several national. So I think we need a third option. We need international support. We need local support. We cannot choose between the regime, criminal regime, which killed till now 500,000, and with terrorism, which we suffer from it, all of us.
When you speak of international support, what does that mean? Does it mean ground forces? Does it mean more money?
We can work on the ground, but they have to protect the air attack, and they have to help in organizing and in ordination. So I think economic support and from free zone in south and free zone in north, we can start from this. They can do that. I think this is the solution now. We cannot stand for more 4 years. So so Syria have been paying the high price since 4 years, and no justice, no international intervention, no any kind of hope.
Dr. Alibwani, unfortunately, it's all the time we have. What you said that sticks with me is it's the problem of the majority also, not just the minorities. Dr. Kamal Alibwani, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we move now to Iran, the Iran deal. The clock is ticking on Iranian nuclear talks. Details have been emerging, though, of a possible agreement Western powers in Iran are cobbling together in the latest round of talks. And from the point of view of Israel and other nations worried by Tehran's nuclear drive, the reports don't make for comfortable reading. I-24 News correspondent Shai Ben-Ari explains.
Mr. Kerry, how's the talk this time?
As representatives of Iran and the P5+1 group left Geneva Monday, following more talks on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program, the tone on both sides was one of optimism. A senior U.S. administration official said the discussions were very serious, useful, and constructive, noting some progress had been made, but there was still a long way to go. The Iranian foreign minister made a similar statement, noting positive talks in particular with the Americans. His deputy stated that Iran would act to improve coordination with the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog agency.
We decided to expand and expedite our cooperation, and we decided to build on that and proceed on our cooperation with the agency in all different fields.
An AFP report says one version of the deal being discussed would place at least a 10-year regime of severe restrictions on Iran's uranium enrichment. Good behavior would be rewarded with a gradual lifting of the restrictions over the final 5 years. Under these restrictions, Iran would need a considerable amount of time to actually produce a bomb if a decision was made to cast the deal aside.
You're looking at a sort of a year breakout time.
That's been something the Secretary, I think, has also talked about in open testimony.
Iran currently has 10,000 operating centrifuges. The P5+1 is looking to reduce that amount, with several officials noting 6,500 as a possible compromise. March 31st is the deadline for reaching a framework agreement. The parties are set to resume talks next Monday, one day before Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's scheduled speech to the U.S. Congress, set to focus on Iran. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon said Monday that any deal signed with Iran would harm Western and Israeli interests. With deadlines looming, a diplomatic showdown approaches.
And with me on set is senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqed. Good evening, Ali. So is this deal as bad, from what we know about it so far, the good behavior and so on, as bad as it's being depicted, at least in Israeli media?
Well, it depends who looks and how does he looks at the things. The agreement, if we take it as is, and if the Israeli suspicions about the fact that the international community would not have serious and significant tools to supervise and to follow the implementation of the agreement, can be a source of worriness for Israel and for some Arab neighbors of the Islamic Republic. But I think, in general, it is a good deal if there is a clear system that will prevent Iran to pass from a point to another point, from the irreversible point where Iran can reach a nuclear
a small but very, very key detail. A very big detail.
Exactly, but this can make the difference between a good and a bad deal. The Iranians are determined to be a part of the nuclear club. Now, whether it will be at the civil aspect, being capable to supply energy to the Iranian market, nuclear energy, this is one thing. And the second thing is the need of the Iranian Republic to present the deal as the Iranian did not make significant concessions, and as the Iranian kept their respect, although there is...
With this current deal, do you think they can sell that to the Iranian public?
I think they can sell it. The question is not the Iranian public, the question is the conservative wing in the Islamic Republic, I mean the Supreme Guide and the Revolutionary Guide leaders. This is the question, because we know that President Rouhani is there, Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif is there, but the decision-making, the real decision-making is in the hand in Khamenei and the leader of the Revolutionary Guards. But Nourid, the most important detail is that the chief of the Nuclear Commission of Iran, Salehi, was in the Iranian team.
A hardliner.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, it's all we have time for now, so we'll end it with a hardliner. Ali Waqed, thanks very much for being with me. And we started to speak about this earlier in the show tonight. Israel's national electricity company has decided to reduce the amount of electricity supplied to the West Bank. And Wednesday, 2 central cities will lose power for just under an hour, a move the state-owned company said was to earn back some of the unprecedented debt owed to them by the Palestinian Authority. As Gabby Weiniger reports from Nablus, cutting electricity is a red line for many residents.
Threatened with daily blackouts by the Israel Electric Corporation, residents in the West Bank city of Nablus believe the power cut is not an economic issue, but a political one. And for some, it marks a red line.
This is 100% collective punishment, and it's aimed to forcing the Palestinians to leave their homes.
The Israeli state-owned electric company is turning off switches across the West Bank in protest of the nearly $500 million in accumulated debts from the Palestinian Authority. But a protest against the administration has turned into a punishment for the people, who feel its effects.
We were surprised when electricity was cut off during a lecture. Electricity is a basic right.
Tens of people stranded in lifts for over an hour. Hospital machinery is switched off, schools closed, and they are all dependent on electricity supplied by an Israeli company, despite paying their bills, and they could be shut off at any time.
As soon as the electricity went off, we lost all our customers. The Zionist occupation bears full responsibility. Where are the Arab countries? Where is the UN? No one should remain silent. If a Jewish dog dies, 100 people cry out. But here we are, deprived of electricity, and no one protests.
The authority and its citizens are not only dependent on Israel for electricity, but also for the over $200 million in Palestinian tax revenue, collected and withheld by the State of Israel as punishment for making moves towards autonomy. This is money that could have been used to pay off the PA's huge electricity bill, among other things.
Usually those targeted by measures, such as a shutdown, are those who have not paid their electricity bill. But our electricity distribution company has paid the bills. We have no debts to the Israeli Electric Corporation.
While the Palestinian Authority is largely dependent on Israeli companies, it seems the huge debt and the Palestinian economic crisis lands on the doorstep of the Israeli Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. Gabrielle Weiniger, I24 News, Nablus.
And to the eastern Ukraine crisis, the Ukrainian military has reported more shelling in war-torn eastern Ukraine, while pro-Russian separatists said today they have begun withdrawing their heavy weapons from the front line as per the Minsk ceasefire agreement. Ukraine says it won't follow suit until the fighting stops. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister David Cameron announced his country will deploy troops in the next month to help train the Ukrainian army. And now to economy. And joining me for a look at the economy for Greece is Shmuel Ben-Tovim of Ben-Tovim Consultants Limited. Good evening.
Good evening.
So the reforms, they're finally submitted, they're accepted. It looks like really good news for Greece finally.
I would say temporarily, because it's interim measures. We don't know what will be the end game. There are many pessimists around. You know, many commentators have used the analogy to a Greek tragedy, which is very appropriate here, which means there will be many stories of hate and love and drama, but unfortunately we know how these
the tragedies don't end well.
They don't end well. So many people think that the Greek government is buying time. Maybe to some extent also the Europeans are buying time, because no one wants to face the big decisions, whether Greece leaves the Eurozone or maybe the European Union altogether.
If that does happen, if the sort of worst case scenario that Greece were to leave the Eurozone, who would it be more disastrous for, Greece or the Eurozone?
I would say both. For Greece, it's definitely not good news, but the Eurozone has made really sincere efforts throughout the years, you know, with crisis in Portugal and in Spain and other parts of the Union, and there is a certain clout in keeping this package together. And once it starts to fall apart, you don't know where it ends.
Now, when we look at this list of reforms, a list is not just a list, it's actual action that has to be taken for Greece to be in a better position. Is the new Greek government able, in terms of public opinion, in terms of its sheer power, to enact these reforms?
It is in a dilemma. On one hand, it has made so many promises during the elections campaign, and the Greek populace voted for them because they, of course, believe that they are going to keep it. For instance, one of the promises was to raise the minimum wage immediately after the elections. It's not happening, and it won't happen in the next few months, because the Greek government, new government, has now to run the country, not to make promises. So it may seem that some of the promises of the elections will never be able to fulfill, for sure not in the near future. And Greece will have to regain the confidence of the free world and
of everyone and
in order to get a real bailout out of the crisis and not just a temporary one.
Very quickly, does the domino effect everybody was fearing on Spain, for example, look likely to happen?
I don't think so, because Spain, Portugal, other more weak links in the EU has taken serious steps. Ireland, for sure, has probably gone out of the crisis. So the Greeks are actually the ones left to take real measures.
A bit of good news to end on. Shmuel Ben Tovim, thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Moving to Iran again, but to a completely different angle. Alongside the Israeli government's warnings on an Iran nuclear deal is the secret war between the two countries. Iran's Unit 901 acts behind the scenes to attack Israeli and Jewish sites around the world and is ready to act in case of an Israeli strike on the nuclear program. Maxime Perez and Shachar Pele take a look at this front of the fight between Israel and Iran.
January 18th of this year, several Hezbollah officials, including Jihad Mournia, are killed near Quneitra, Syria, in a strike attributed to Israel. Facing threats of reprisal from Iran and the Shiite Lebanese group, Israel raises its level of alert at home and abroad. For the Mossad and Israeli intelligence bodies, vengeance could come from Unit 910, a clandestine organization connected to a unit of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Its purpose: hit Israeli interests all around the world.
What message does Hezbollah send with its Unit 910? If you attack us in Lebanon, where it's easiest since it's at your border, where you could activate military or air force, we will carry out operations against you around the world, including Jewish targets. It will be very difficult for you to protect.
The act that launched Unit 910 is the attack against the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires on March 17, 1992. The bombing that left 29 people dead took place 1 month to the day after the assassination of Abbas al-Musawi, Hezbollah's Secretary General. 2 years later, on July 18, 1994, another attack would hit the Amia Jewish Community Center, also in the Argentinian capital. There, 85 people lost their lives. Unit 910 shows up on the radar of the Mossad, which is working to stop attacks against Israeli targets abroad, those poorly protected or geographically isolated. In Africa, Southeast Asia, and even in Eastern Europe, as in the attack on Israeli tourists in Burgas in July of 2012.
Since February 2008, since the assassination of Imad Mournia in Damascus by Israel and the United States, we've seen countless attack attempts from Unit 910 around the world, especially in less stable regions. These attempts are made with the support of local or directly with the Iranian intelligence services.
Unit 910 also takes on a new dimension amid the struggle against an Iranian nuclear program. Among its goals is getting revenge for scientists whose death was attributed to Israel, a permanent time bomb ready to be launched in case of any Israeli military operation against the Iranian regime.
Between 2010 and 2012, with Israel preparing to attack Iran's nuclear plants, the operation is on the verge of being triggered. The Mossad and IDF military intelligence identify information and are able to identify almost 35 terrorist cells attached to Unit 910, spread out in all 4 corners of the world and ready to act if Israel attacks the nuclear plants in Iran.
מטרות ישראליות או יהודיות, במקרה בישראל תתקיף את בסיסי הגרעין, את מתקני הגרעין של איראן.
In the meanwhile, Unit 910 is facing a resounding internal crisis. Last month, its chief Mohammed Chaouraba was arrested in Lebanon, accused by Hezbollah of spying for Israel.
And shifting now a bit, with me for a look at the literary correspondent and author Ayman Sikseck. Good evening, Ayman.
Good evening, Noe.
So we've heard Kerry today basically call Putin a liar, and now it turns out he's also a kleptomaniac.
He's also a kleptomaniac according to his own people. Karen Dawisha, who was born in Russia and is now a professor of political science in Miami University in Ohio.
I was going to say, where is she speaking out against Putin from?
Well,
it's from a safe Miami beach.
Yes, and it's interesting that you should say that because Cambridge University Press was supposed to publish this book, Putin's Kleptocracy, but decided not to when the manuscript was ready.
Really?
They said they fear libel laws in Britain, but of course Karen Dawisha said they're fearing Putin. Eventually it was published by Simon & Schuster, an equally important publishing house, and it really is a very, very controversial book.
Only shows his power if a British massive publishing house will do that kind of make that kind of decision.
Exactly. And she begins the book in the 1980s when Putin just wanted to rise to power, and she shows how the KGB took money after the Soviet Union collapsed and used it for their own benefit. Later on in 2005, when Putin became president, she shows us with documents that have been made available to the public that he stole millions of dollars that were assigned for medical facilities to build a luxurious palace.
And how does she explain him getting away with this for decades and still in power and arguably, despite a lot of crises, not going anywhere?
Well, interestingly, he's never been tried for any of these crimes, despite
No.
yes, despite the fact
I cannot believe it.
Despite the fact that, you know, these accusations of corruption against Putin may not be shocking to any of us. But what she does do that's new in this book is try to explain the psychological motives. Why is he doing this? To really try to understand Putin the man. And that's where the kleptomania comes in. She says greed has made him a kleptomaniac of power, of seats, of more and more assets. And it's a fascinating read, almost a psychological thriller.
Very interesting. I suppose Vladimir Putin really makes a fantastic subject for that. I would even say in a Bond movie or something, but maybe I should.
Russians, beware what you
Yes.
write.
I'm in Siksek. Thanks very much for
Thank
this.
you, Nolit.
Moving to Israeli elections, as elections there approach, the current runner-up, Isaac Herzog, the leader of the Zionist Union opposition, held a press conference today with foreign press in an attempt to strengthen his position as the alternative for Netanyahu. The News Today's diplomatic correspondent Eli Ochenberg was there.
Less than 1 month to the Israeli general elections and exactly 1 week before Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to the U.S. Congress, Prime Ministerial hopeful and Zionist Union leader Isaac Herzog is showing nothing less than absolute determination.
Netanyahu's spin about who's going to Washington and who's not going to Washington must stop. No Israeli leader will ever accept a nuclear Iran. However, the way to deal with it, that's where I beg to differ with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Besides the harsh criticism of Netanyahu, Herzog announced Tuesday he will not be traveling to the U.S. to appear before the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee AIPAC annual conference because of the controversy Netanyahu's speech has created. But the speech in Congress might be his last worry, as Herzog has been suffering from an image problem since the beginning of the race. Weak, non-charismatic, and lacking natural authority are the main claims against him, something he's intensively trying to change. And since he's keenly aware that he is, until the elections at least, no longer the leader of the opposition, but a challenger for the top job, he refuses to use an underdog's rhetoric.
I've been trying to educate the Israeli public and body politic that Netanyahu is beatable. I intend to win, and I will win, and I will be the next Prime Minister of Israel, and I will replace Benjamin Netanyahu, and I have no other option.
And we'll have much more on the Israeli election campaigns in just a little while in the debate, but first to sports. And with me, of course, is Jonathan Regev, host of the I-24 News Sports Magazine. Good evening.
Great. Good evening.
So I understand we're talking Qatar, FIFA. I just have to ask, who had the brilliant idea in the first place to hold the World Cup in Qatar in the summer?
FIFA chose this. It looked really, really bad at the beginning. First, venues are chosen 7 years ahead. The 2022 World Cup should have been chosen pretty much now. This choice was made back in 2010, together with the 2018 World Cup. You can understand why you choose 2018, late 2010. That I can understand. Why did they have to choose back then 2022?
Why did they?
There's a lot of speculations. I don't have any proof to what I'm going to say. I think that a lot of money was involved. I think
it's
a lot
Qatar,
of
so undeniably there had to be money there.
I think a lot of money went to the right pockets. I have no proof. I cannot prove that. So it's an allegation I cannot prove. I believed something fishy was going on.
And so now, winter? When is the World
winter,
Cup?
yes. There's no official word yet, but FIFA set up a task force to choose the date for the World Cup. This task force, after traveling time and time again to Qatar, will recommend November and December 2022. FIFA will make the official choice next month. There was another date that was proposed, that was February 2022. That is virtually impossible because that is the date for the Winter Olympics in 2022. You do not want a clash between FIFA and the International Olympic Committee. So it looks like November, December, summer is of course out of the question with temperatures rising up to 50 degrees. The teams in Europe will now have to adjust their timetable.
Right, I wanted to ask, so what does this mean for the teams? Because they're not preparing a month before. It's years of preparation.
Absolutely, and the 22-23 season will look completely different than what we used to see. November, December, that's meat season in the domestic leagues, in the Champions League. How will that look? It's yet to be seen. The teams we're hoping that the World Cup will be played in the beginning of May, and then they will have to make just little adjustments to the timetables. But this task force said, you know what? Yes, beginning of May, technically that's spring, but when the average temperature is only 35 degrees, the answer is no. So if the World Cup is held in Qatar, which I'm against, but it seems to be the case, then November and December, that would be the proper choice.
Valuable players to risk to heat stroke. So you were speaking about the Champions League in 2022. What about now?
2050, yeah, we have plenty of time to worry till 2022. I don't know how that season will look. I know how this season looks, and we have a giant game tonight. Manchester City hosting Barcelona in the round of 16. Two teams that could have easily gone to the final. Only one of them will make it to the quarterfinal. They will meet in Manchester today. Barcelona looked to be the clear favorites up until the weekend. They had a run of 11 consecutive wins, looking great, and then came this surprise loss to Malaga on Saturday. Something changed there, didn't look very good. Manchester City, on the other hand, they won 5-0 over the weekend. Very, very big game.
So it's good about sports. It's always a surprise, no matter what sport. Jonathan Regev, thanks very much. We'll be back with the results, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
That's it for us for now. 2 minutes. We'll be back with the daily debate, Israel elections 2015. Don't go anywhere.